Hey everyone, it's Ethan. I'm joined by our production manager, Colby Bradford, for another episode of. Okay, everyone, just as a quick reminder, none of what we're going to be covering today is financial advice. We are not certified financial planners, financial professionals, so we are not legally authorized to give you any financial advice. None of this is investment advice, so take everything that we say and share with you with a grain of salt. We're simply sharing from our personal experience uh, and basically just sharing. Basically, just sharing all the information that we possibly can based on our own experiences and what we think works for us. And that's why we want to share it for you today. And before we go any further, just introducing the topic that we're going to be going through today, we are going to be talking about the news. Who doesn't love the news? Especially with every little moment blowing up in our faces these days, being bombarded by different sources, not necessarily knowing what to trust and what's good and what's not, especially as it comes to financial advice in the economic world. So that's what we're going to be covering today. And personally, what I like to do and the information that I like to take in when it comes to getting my news, when it comes to financial stuff. Finding your sources and vetting your sources is a super important part of being an informed consumer. And that's, basically the mantra of the show. We want the people in the audience, we want you guys to come away with a better understanding of how money moves, specifically on credit, crypto, and payments. And that's some of the stuff that we're going to be going over today. So, without further ado, again, joined by our lovely production manager, Colby Bradford, who I'm basically going to be tutoring today. But yeah, let's get into it.
All right.
Before we actually, or sorry, Colby, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to say hi. I don't think they can see me right now, but hi, everybody.
Okay,
Excited to be here. Excited to go over some news sources.
awesome, awesome. Well, I'm happy to walk you through this stuff, Chad. But before we get into that, another quick thing that I just wanted to go for is just, where did I start getting my news? Where did that interest come from? So in college, I majored in political science. I loved following politics for as long as I could think of. Grew up watching West Wing with my family. Lovely little show. You can still find it on Netflix today. I'm actually a season ahead of my parents currently. Don't tell them that. But that said, that's where it really kicked off my interest in both politics and just finding good sources of news. I can remember specifically when I was in high school, I would be going home, driving to and from school. It was about a 15-minute commute over to my high school. And what I would always listen to, I wouldn't listen to music, even, as much as I loved, as much as I love music, it was always NPR that was on. And whether it was the morning report, the morning brew in the morning, where I get my political news, often at the end of the day, I'd be listening to Planet Money on the way home. So that's an NPR production hosted by Kai Ryssdal. And that's like the first time I ever heard of the term inverted yield curve. And I had no idea what that meant. And I kind of wanted to learn more. I had always figured that economics was implicitly tied to politics. So when we're thinking of how does the political world work, it's often governed by the economic conditions. That's a huge reason why Donald Trump ended up winning in the 2024 election is because people were so frustrated with the economic state. So, without giving my political affiliation away, that's why I think it's super important to stay informed and stay on top of the news. So, but before we get into it, or sorry, now that we're finally getting into the news sources, I will show you the lovely background that we have today is Yahoo Finance. This is where I like to start off my morning news nowadays. It's the first thing that I log into when I get into work. A bunch of my, what I previously did in my role, a large portion of it was finding news and delivering that newsletter to my entire company. It was a really stressful experience being like, first year out of college, sending it to an on and off again Fortune 500 company of, what news to pick. Thankfully, we use this awesome app called Dow Jones Factiva, so it actually filtered it down. So it was pretty easy, but don't tell anyone that. It looks better on my resume when I don't over explain it. But nowadays, I am still in charge in some capacities of making sure that people are informed on important developments in the financial world, in the economic sector, and especially as it relates to the payments industry. So this is the first place that I'm checking. As soon as first sip of coffee in me, I'm going to Yahoo Finance. And there's a handful of reasons why I really like it. First and foremost, it gives a good layout of not only economic news, but important news and things that are happening throughout the world that will impact, financial markets. So as you can see right here, you've got various articles from Bloomberg. Honestly, all of these are from Bloomberg now that I'm looking at it. But one of the cool things that it also includes is not only like the title, but what commodity or what often company is being affected by whatever the story is. So you can see that CLF, I'm pretty sure that's the crude oil futures ticker. So that's how you can see. So it's saying that, all right, crude oil is up 2% day over day. So you can click into that story, because
Oh,
it's on the Strait of Hormuz, some further tensions there. Well, might be crashing a little bit.
yep. It's like
All right, really quick, I gotta.
mine's freaking out too. It's not just you. Hang on.
Yeah,
The fuck? You do it, you're crushing it. You're crushing it.
appreciate it. Okay, my my internet should be okay.
I know mine was saying that my storage is like fucked, but hang on. Let me just
Hmm.
maybe this will help clear out my trash.
Yeah, we'll just yeah, definitely clear out your trash.
Yeah, doing
We'll
that.
just like wait for this to load, and then do we want to do like a cut in here?
Yeah, we can do a cut in
Like
here.
I'll like clap at this point, and then
Yeah. And then just, yeah, you can go for it.
hmm. Actually, I do want to check what CL. Actually, I'm gonna do that on my phone just because my internet is so fucking slow. Oh, okay. Oh, yes, I was right. It is crude oil futures. Okay. All right, we're back in business.
Sweet.
Actually, we're not back in business just yet. Okay. So as you can see, once we clicked on the source, you do get that full story there along with the ticker, so it's something that I really, really like. Now, one of the other cool features of this, it's not just news stories where you can see the ticker symbol. One of the things that I like to do is say, like, let's go to Bitcoin, because that's something we talk a lot about on the show. One of the things you can also do, not only that you're seeing the chart for Bitcoin, which will pop up here momentarily. Come on, buddy.
Oh, that's cool, man. I'll just put it
Yeah.
down.
Mhm. Yeah, so now that you're seeing the day over day chart for Bitcoin, one of the other cool things that you can see is the shares in circulation, the volume that's being traded day over day. Not unless you're a crypto day trader, which I'm definitely not necessarily something you could be concerned about. But one of the things that is interesting, at least to me, is to see the market capitalization. And again, just as a quick reminder, market capitalization is the price of a share times the amount of shares in circulation, and that's how you figure out the market cap. And one of the also really neat things that you can do here is you can actually click into the news tab on the left. Dun, 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 dun.
Uh,
Shout out my goat production manager for this one.
Yep. Yep. I'll be on that edit.
Yeah.
Yahoo!
Right? Yeah, so once you click into that news tab, one of the things that you can see here is, or sorry, are articles related to, why that price is going up. So that's one of the big reasons why I like Yahoo Finance, just for, general getting your scoop of the day, probably the best place to look. So now moving on to another source that I really like, and I've previewed this before in another episode, is Coin Market Cap. So very similar to Yahoo Finance in the sense where you can see, the daily and weekly trends. This also tracks market cap too, which I think is really important, especially if you do own cryptocurrencies. It's important to see, how many people are actually investing in the coin, especially if it, potentially could lose all of its liquidity someday, which, happens when folks tend to buy those meme coins. Remember, not financial advice. Another important thing that I will say about crypto news and getting crypto news in general is it's really a mixed bag. A lot of people that talk about crypto news will often talk about the day-to-day or week-to-week changes of a certain cryptocurrency that they're trying to sell you on. And if they're not trying to sell you on a particular cryptocurrency, they're probably trying to sell you on an algorithm to help them trade the currency. The whole idea for most crypto influencers is just get more people involved to buy the currency that you have, since you are likely an early time buyer. One of the things that I will say about cryptocurrency more broadly is that it doesn't really behave like any other speculative asset. So that's why it's really hard to track, news wise. I will say, like, yes, it's important when Bitcoin goes from, $60 a coin to $75,000 a coin. Like that is very significant price movement, and that is something that we've seen over the year. But it's more so tracking the coin itself than trying to predict or time the market. When I think of what I like to look at crypto news, and when I'm looking at crypto news specifically, the things that are interesting to me, especially when we think about how money actually moves, is the systems behind the money movement or how crypto actually works. We did a fantastic episode on this where we went through how to actually set up a crypto wallet. Feel free to check out that episode. Colby, can you link that for us?
I, I'm on it.
Awesome. This is
It's
my go
linked.
for real. Yeah, so in episode two, we talked about how to set up a self-custody wallet. And so you might be wondering, okay, Ethan, like where do you get your news for that? Where do you get your sources? Oftentimes I get led to a Britannica sources, but if I'm being completely honest and transparent with you, a lot of the research that we do for the show is aggregated by AI. There's a lot of content out there, but the important part is when you do get that information, you are going to the primary sources that it sends you to, and you're making sure that information is verifiable and true. So, a super important part of our creative process on the show. But generally speaking, like that's what you want to do. I personally like to look at the systems versus looking at any one currency. I think that's the most fair and appropriate way to evaluate the technology as a whole. Is looking at the system side versus the like the actual currency and trying to time the market because that never works out.
Hmm.
Reminder, not financial advice. That is definitely not financial advice. Okay, now that we've covered cryptocurrency and digital assets and kind of the stock market more broadly, let's talk about fintech news more specifically. So, this is one where I would say I do have a lot of experience going to primary and secondary sources. Oftentimes, from my role when I was putting together that daily newsletter, these were some of the heavy hitters that we would look at for industry news. And we're actually potentially hoping to have a guest later on in the series that works for the American Banker. So, that's the first one that I'll take you guys to today.
Nice.
So the American Banker is really fantastic because it doesn't just go into, banking news as you would think, because that's super stuffy and boring. But the actual, broader economic information that you're getting, but through like a specific lens of banking, if that makes sense. So like think that you are getting the perspective of a banker within the content of, some of the stuff and some of the articles that they have going on here. Um, But as you can see, it's not just banking. Like, sure, it's coming from their perspective of, the banking sector, but what you can see is it's like different categories and subcategories of the various subsets of the banking field. So you have commercial banking, consumer banking, policy focus. So, something that I would be interested in as a policy studies major when I was in college. Very interesting from a regulatory perspective. And, quick little tidbit here. The CFPB, that's something that we typically look for a lot at work, big updates there, because those are the folks in charge of regulating, as the name implies. Sorry, I didn't get a chance to explain that. The CFPB, the oh boy, I'm blanking on the name.
Yeah.
Consumer finance. Yeah, we're gonna edit that part out, or Colby will turn it into a blooper. But it is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. That's
Nice. There you
that's
go.
gonna be yeah, that's gonna be funny to keep it in. Those are the guys that look over my shoulder at work. So that's it's great that
I'm,
I don't know their
I'm
name.
keeping that in. That's staying.
Okay. All right, that's fine. Yeah, so the CFPB, those are like the, super important regulators for basically the financial products that you use in your daily life. So if there is harm done to you as a consumer, say, you get overcharged for a late fee on your credit card, those are the folks that are supposed to help you out. Now, the current regulatory environment is a little bit loose. They're kind of letting the market just do their thing. It's not like they're kicking their feet up or anything. But the current regulatory environment is a little bit lax. It was definitely much more strict under the Biden administration because they are looking out for you, the little guy. CFPB was created after the 2008 financial crisis, basically as a good faith effort to try to get consumers more protection because they got screwed over on mortgage rates, plain and simple. Yeah. But then again, moreover, on the site, American Banker really broadly, super credible source for when you're trying to get information about banks, payments, etc. It goes into various subsets of the banking, and I think we've beat the dead horse here. So, moving on to another source that I really like, specific for payments. These guys are a little more tech forward than the others, so more likely to talk about topics like agentic commerce, for example. You might get some crypto news kind of sprinkled in here. And definitely where you're going to see, like how AI is specifically impacting the worst place. Yeah, there's even some, sort of pop culture, news related here. The Weekender's 10 best AI movies, of the past 20 years. There you go. But yeah, as you can see, various topics, kind of like we were talking about. The retail one is interesting. That's probably where you're going to see I guess the most consumer facing news, if that makes sense. It mostly just talks about, number one, how financial institutions, but not only financial institutions, how, merchants, so like the stores that you go to day, are thinking about the payments industry. So, a really interesting example that I can think of is, there was a merchant activist group earlier in 2025 that was chiefly responsible for making sure the networks weren't in charge of paying or sorry, the merchants weren't being charged for interchange fees. So the fee that it basically costs for a person to use and swipe a credit card, essentially they wanted to kick that back to the consumer. So that's something that would probably be covered in the more retail aspect of payments. And I also like to think that payments is like a little more consumer friendly. I've, met some folks that have had some conversations with the folks that work at payments, and that's one of the things that they're really trying to pride themselves on is trying to get, folks like you and me, and honestly, the general audience for our channel, to get into this kind of stuff, to get into the payments world, because it is important for learning and knowing how your money moves. But more so as, as the site kind of implies, as a news site versus any actual, um, more educational focused piece, is if that makes sense. Okay, so let's get moving on. Let's talk about credit cards. Who doesn't love credit cards? I
All
like
right.
credit card rewards. I don't like paying my credit card, but. I love my United Explorer card.
Do you have the lounge?
Yes, yes, I love those two annual lounge passes. I use them sparingly, but Nerd Wallet is a fantastic source, and honestly, one of the ones that I used when I was evaluating my credit card. This is or credit card choice rather. This one's really interesting because it gives you kind of an idea of like, okay, what product are you or service are you looking for from a consumer's perspective? So, are you trying to get a mortgage? I'm sure a lot of folks listening here probably aren't trying to get a mortgage, but if you have personal loans that you might need to take out, credit cards that you need to take out, who's got the best interest rate on a high yield savings account. This is a great place to evaluate from a one-on-one perspective, like, okay, like is this a good financial product for me? Not only does it give you product details, but it also gives you their personal take in a very simple, easy to use, user friendly, readable way. Like, all right, is this credit card make sense for me? One of the things that I also really like about them, we haven't had a chance to talk about in the show, but this honestly gives me a good idea for another episode, is FICO score, and it gives you, the recommended range for your FICO before you apply. Now, I do want to note really quick for the audience, when you do apply for a credit card, you do get dinged on your FICO score for the most part. Oftentimes, that's called a hard credit check when you're doing the physical application process. So you might notice for, a few months, potentially even a quarter or two maybe, that your credit score will be potentially a little bit lower than when you initially applied for that credit card. But that's a normal part of the credit and decisioning process. So don't be super alarmed when that comes up. Okay, moving on. The Motley Fool is the next one we're going to talk about. This one is really, I found that this one, well, well, uh, so the Motley Fool primarily does stock market news and investment research. But one of the things that I really, really like about them, it's not just, stock and investment news. They also do like a lot of really helpful articles on just like understanding different financial products. So not necessarily from the consumer side, the way that NerdWallet does it, but the Motley Fool will do it from this perspective. So let's say I want to figure out what an unsecured personal loan is. Well, actually, we're gonna
Yeah.
give me a second. Okay, the next site that we're going to talk about is the Motley Fool. And one of the things that I really like about this site is like, sure, you've got the credit card breakdowns from a very personal customer perspective on NerdWallet, but the Motley Fool actually gives you a really interesting breakdown of like how, markets actually kind of work and move as it relates to these financial products. So, let's say you're interested in learning like, okay, like what is a personal loan, number one, but like number two, like what is the volume of personal loans? So very similar to a market cap, like, okay, how many people are taking out personal loans? Like what's the average balance? Because that's something important that we want to think about, like as consumers in a broader economy. As an economy overall, it's not fantastic that we have, let's see, $276 billion in unsecured personal loan debt, as which is a record high. That's like not a like that's not fantastic. Like that's not something that we want to see, you know, as we want a certain amount of debt as a, broadly speaking, as an economic base, because, that's how you actually drive, monetary policy, and that's how you actually make how money actually gains value in this country. But that said, it's not, this isn't the healthiest thing. And you can find similar articles, as it relates to credit card balances and stuff like that. So I've found this site to be largely helpful in that sense. Now, I don't want to go back to Yahoo Finance just in case this totally blows up my phone or laptop rather.
Mhm.
But I will talk about one of the things that I talked about in the intro, money with Nope, that's the book. Okay, you're gonna have to. Okay. So, right now, all this is, and all that I'm showing you right now on your screen is a live performance that they did with Planet Money, that NPR news show that I talked about at the beginning of the episode. But one of the things specifically that you're seeing here is a podcast that they did with Kyla Scanlon. And she is honestly my go-to if I am looking for any type of news on Instagram as it relates to economics. I go to her first. Huge fan of her as an influencer. One of the things that I really, really appreciate about how her style is she explains like honestly what are complicated economic concepts and takes a very well-spoken but understandable approach to explaining them. So one of the things that she really likes to talk about is AI workforce labor displacement. So basically, what that means is I'm sure you have all heard at this point is that AI is taking our jobs. Yes and no. The idea of AI is cutting down some entry level positions, and she explains this far better than I ever could. Uh, but, or actually,
Hang on. We have 9 minutes left. So maybe
yeah.
skip the frequently asked questions and just go to the end. But continue on this.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to share my screen for this part. So
Okay.
Kayla Scanlon, one of the, or Kyla, I think it's Kyla. One of the things that I really like about her is the simple way that she delivers information, and as she talks about, AI labor markets. Like, yes, AI is very clearly affecting the labor markets. Companies are eliminating entry level positions, but is it necessarily because of AI, or do firms just not have the money to hire people? And those are some of the like broader economic questions that she is really, really good at tackling. One of the things that I really appreciate about her is she calls it like she sees it. One of the things that we're really seeing that's weird in the overall market right now is just how it's reacting to the Iran war. And she does a fantastic job of explaining it. And I would love to link her Instagram page here. She does a fantastic job of explaining like the market should not be reacting in this way, like the market should not be fluctuating to being like all-time highs to like, hey, we're still at war where 20% of the world's global oil has not been consistently flowing for the better part of a month. So like the market overall should be down, but just the way that it reacting is nuts. And she does a fantastic job of explaining it.
Mhm.
So I think that rounds out all the things that I want to talk about from a news and source standpoint. So Colby, I really appreciate you just let me info dump on you. Um, but now that
Happy
we've
to listen.
got right, but now that we've gotten a chance to do that, do you have any questions for me? I know we're a little bit short on time here, but I'm sure we can squeeze one or two in before we go.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I'm curious how much time you actually spend on the news each week, like on average.
Well,
Yeah, if you could,
right. Okay. So are we counting doom scrolling on Instagram Reels?
give me with and then give me without.
Okay. I would say I probably spend about like 20 minutes a day, like just on Instagram Reels, like looking at like different economics news. And I know that like sounds ridiculous, but there's just like a lot to absorb, from like the AP, the Reuters, and honestly, just all the crazy stuff that's happening with our politics, a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah.
And then I would say a good portion of my day probably say like another 20, 30 minutes. Like you really only need like an hour of news a day. Like honestly.
Mhm.
Like I said, I start my morning with a coffee and looking at Yahoo Finance. Like I'm
Yeah.
probably like doing that looking through sources for like a good 20 minutes. The other 20 minutes is me being on Instagram. But if there's a topic that like I'm really interested in, and especially as it comes to research for our show, yeah, then I'm gonna dig a little bit deeper. But I don't think I would necessarily count that towards like news overall, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
20 minutes on Instagram Reels? Are you sure?
Yeah, I spent a lot more time on Instagram Reels. That's just how much I was counting for news sources. But
Okay.
because I
Hey
send
man, I'm
you
like, I
Reels
get
like it's
so
my
many.
job. Yeah. Okay.
Um,
What else you got
one
for
more
me?
question for you.
Yeah.
Last question. But this is how do you separate signal from noise? There's a lot of stuff
Yeah.
being thrown at, I mean, if we talk about Instagram, we talk about news,
Yeah.
just what's worth listening to, you know?
Trusted sources. And I know those are few and far between these days, but like really try to stick to like the verified sources, like the Bloombergs of the world, like the Yahoo Finances of the world, like the APs, the Reuters, but it's important to like look at how those news sources are biased too. Like it's not a bad idea to look up like, okay, like who actually owns, like the Wall Street Journal, for example. It's owned by Jeff Bezos. So there's probably going to be like a little bit pro corporate bias in their reporting. And I think the other thing that's like super important to look out for is if someone's trying to sell you something, you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
Like obviously like people like want your attention to read the story, but if someone is trying to like actually sell you like a financial product or for example, like like those algorithms that we talked about in the crypto section of this episode, like don't like they're trying to get something out of you and it's probably your money and your attention. Like
Mhm.
don't look at the crypto like outrage and bait videos. I actually subscribe to a guy. I don't know why I'm still subscribed to him, but his name is Austin Hilton over on YouTube. And it's just like the most rage baity things I have ever seen in my entire life that just pop up on my feed. I'm like, every time I'm like, why have I not unsubscribed yet? But, that's neither here nor there. So, like, make sure that you're getting it from reliable sources and make sure that, like, if someone's trying to sell you something, just like know what they're selling and take what they say with a grain of salt. Yeah, so I think that's all the time for that we have for today. Colby, I really appreciate you being on the show. Thank you for letting me walk you through this stuff. It's always fun to have you on, when we don't have a guest expert. Now, that said, I know we kind of teased it a little bit. We might have someone from the American Banker potentially on our show. Still in the works, though, still working on those, corporate communications and outreach. So TBD on that one. But really excited to continue having guests on the show and continue having guests on the series. As always, thank you so much for our listeners. Subscribe to our podcast over on Spotify, on YouTube. Now we've got YouTube Shorts rolling out. And then follow us on LinkedIn. That's the tip of the spear for us. So we'd really appreciate a follow over there. And thank you so much for tuning in to Keeping It Capital. I'm your host, Ethan.
Colby.
All right. Take it easy, everyone. Peace.